How do products from your local farmer end up on your plate? What happens to food waste? Can we offer quality food in the fight against food poverty? Integrated urban food policies can answer these questions. And the FoodTrails project is helping cities develop their own to positively impact food systems. From farm to fork. The project operates under the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact and responds to the EU Food 2030 policy. Each partner city is running a living lab to find tangible solutions to specific food issues. From developing food councils to coordinating food aid, from strategic public procurement to food education. In FoodTrails, collaboration is a key ingredient. At the local level, relevant stakeholders are involved in designing solutions. And at project level, researchers and European cities come together to exchange and learn from each other. Create your own recipe for more sustainable, healthy and inclusive urban food policies. Join the FoodTrails momentum.
Welcome everyone to this third episode of the FoodTrails webinar series, Midday Munchies on Urban Food Policies. This is the third webinar of the series of 8 episodes, and you can find the recordings of the first 2 webinars on the FoodTrails YouTube channel. So, just a few words before we start on the FoodTrails project. It's a 4-year EU-funded Horizon 2020 project, which aims to translate the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact's collective commitment to integrating urban food policies into measurable and long-term progress towards sustainable food systems. So the project has been working with 11 European cities in supporting them to implement sustainable, healthy, and inclusive food policies. I am Madeleine Coste, and I'm the head of food policy and projects at Eurocities. Eurocities is one of the leading networks, is the leading network of over 200 major European cities working together to ensure a good quality of life for all of our citizens. And one of our 7 goals is to support urban food systems, and that's why we are a partner of the FoodTrails project. So our role in the project is to facilitate the exchanges between cities implementing food policies so that they can learn from each other, see what works in one context that can be inspiration to another city. And it's also for cities an opportunity to discuss the challenges that they face and which solutions have worked for them. So I'm very happy to introduce the 3 speakers that we have here with us today. If you can go to the next slide, please. So we have Ernst Jan Prosman from the Politecnico di Milano, who's a FoodTrails researcher, Mrs. Nadia Tonoli, a city officer for the city of Bergamo, Mette Svendgaard from the city of Copenhagen, and myself from Eurocities. I'm going to send here in the chat the calendar of all of the episodes because, like I said, this is a series of 8 webinars. This is number 3rd, and so you can already click on this link and see the next episodes that will be coming up. So what is this webinar series about? After almost 4 full years of the project, this webinar series is aiming at sharing beyond the project's consortium all of the knowledge and experiences built by the FoodTrails cities and experts. Each webinar is aiming to promote the replication of solutions and best practices and hopefully inspire some of you to do the same in your city. So the series is going to touch upon many different topics, including citizens' engagement, food waste, public procurement. So you can have a look here at the calendar for each episode. And if you want to sign up for one specific calendar, one specific webinar, you can click the link or also follow us on our social media to receive the links to sign up to the next ones. So today's webinar is going to dive into the tools developed and used in the FoodTrails project that city officers can use to develop and implement urban food policies. So we're first going to hear from Ernst, who will introduce and give an overview of these tools and why they were developed, and then hear from Bergamo and Copenhagen how they have been using these tools to think through the design and the implementation of their food policies. So why do we need such tools? Food systems are, of course, very complex. There's so many different issues to address, so many different actors to involve in developing the food policy, and many different actors that will be impacted and that can benefit from the food policy. So it's very important to think of these different elements to build a food policy that will address the right issues and that will be effective in meeting the objectives. So that's why the FoodTrails project has been so powerful. It's about cities working tightly with university researchers who have been supporting the cities by guiding them in this process, developing tools to help city officers in thinking through the design and implementation of the food policies and the living labs, and also helping to evaluate the impact of their work. So after everyone will have their short presentations, there will also be 25 minutes for question and answer. So as participants, you can click the Q&A function on the Zoom chat, not the Zoom chat, sorry, on Zoom, and you can ask your questions there. Please only use the Q&A function and not the chat unless you want to share information about what you might be doing in your city. For example, this can be done through the chat. We will also ask you to please fill in a short survey after the webinar to hear how useful you found this session. So because like I said, this is a series of 8 episodes. We're only on episode 3. So we really want to make sure that this series is useful to you. But to know if we're addressing the right issues in a clear way, we really need your feedback. So I'm already going to share the link here in the chat. There we go. And someone is saying in the chat that yes, each of the webinars is being recorded, and you'll be able to find, like Marius has just sent in the chat, the link to the past episodes. Thank you very much. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Ernst now to share his short presentation. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Said by Madeleine, my name is Ernst-Jan Prosman. I'm an assistant professor at Politecnico di Milano and a researcher in the FoodTrails project. And I'm going to present very briefly an overview of the 2 tools which we have been developing in this project. And then afterwards, my colleagues from the city of Bergamo and the city of Copenhagen, they will give an example of the tools, how they are used in practice. So next slide. So just to underline this one more time, so why do we need urban food policy? So urbanization is something which is like it's a phenomenon which is increasing throughout the world, also in Europe, which means that cities start playing a key role in how to address food policy, food issues. So next slide. So despite the existence of many successful food policies, such like, for example, food policies developed under the umbrella of the Milano Urban Food Policy Pact, still remains quite difficult to develop food policies. And this is because there's a lot of different needs in cities. So there might be different types of citizens living there who might have different lifestyles, different jobs, different work-life balances, different dietary requirements, different family situations. So kids going to schools or having elderly people or being young families, having different incomes. So this type of people have different food policy needs. Next slide, please. So one way to find so this makes it very difficult to develop food policies and to consider in a food policy all these different types of need. It's important. It's important that the food policies are based on this type of needs. Living labs, which we developed in the FoodTrails project, offer a very good way of doing this because they're very, let's say, call it place-based, citizen-centric, meaning that we look at what are the needs of the citizens and we can co-create solutions, so ideate solutions with them and experiment with different types of solutions with them. So living labs is a very good way of developing this type of food policies. Next slide. There are a lot of tools also existing. So there's, of course, a lot of tools related to the living labs, which we're not going to talk about today, like doing interviews and having workshops with citizens, etc. These are all tools which we use in the 2 tools which we are going to exist. But some tools already exist also. The problem of these tools, and I'm just mentioning one, such as the city region food system assessment, is that these tools, they tend to be very time consuming. So they might have very rich data collection, have a lot of analysis, meaning a lot of time is needed to use the tool. Seeing that citizens have a very particular context, typically we have elections every 3, 4, 5 years, we need to have a timeline which is faster, to be faster. So this is one of the drawbacks of existing tools. Another drawback of those tools is they can be very costly, so they need a lot of hours, like man time to develop or to use to collect the data, to then come up with solutions for this type of tool, to analyze the data, etc. They can be very complex, so if you want to work together in living labs with citizens, they can be very difficult to use, both from a coordinator perspective, but also especially from the point of view of citizens which are involved. And then finally, some of the tools, they rely on very rich data, which is not always available, so it's unavailable data. So what we tried to develop is, we used two tools, one developed by ourselves, one adjusted, let's say, for this project, trying to circumvent this type of drawbacks. Next slide, please. So the first tool is a tool which we developed ourselves, but it's based on an existing tool. Marius, if you want, you can click on all the exactly on all the animations. And it's called the Food Policy Action Canvas. So food policy is what we would like to do, what we like to achieve with the food policy, is that it's something which is a change which is desired. So we want to bring a food policy which citizens want. So it's a desired food policy. At the same time, we want to find out, okay, how does this food policy look like? And it needs to be feasible and viable. So we need to be able to implement this. So what we figured that this is very similar to how business models are developed. So business models also need to be desirable. You want to offer something which customers want to have. They need to be feasible. So we need to be able to do it. So we need to have the resources and activities to do it. And it needs to be viable. So also from a cost perspective, it needs to be viable. So maybe different drivers and barriers blocking a food policy. So we need to take this into account. So the business model canvas is a very easy tool, which is probably one of the most used tools in the business world. So we adjusted the business model canvas and we developed the food policy action canvas. We'll explain this later in a bit more detail, but it basically goes through 4 different stages. So the first stage is through different living lab tools, such as doing interviews, analyzing looking what other people are doing, having workshops with other people, try to identify what are the food policy needs. So what is it what we want to offer to our citizens based on what they need? So make sure that it's desired. A second step is to identify the citizens which we want to reach, or the communities which we want to reach with the food policy action. So this is what we want to do, and this is for who we want to do. So these are the first 2 steps. Then we start creating the food policy ideas. And if you do this in the main blocks of the business model canvas, which are identifying who are the stakeholders which need to be involved, what are the activities which they need to do? So how are we going to reach? What are the activities needed to implement the food policy? So do we need to have to engage citizens? Do we need to have workshops with citizens? Do we need to do certain things to implement the food policies? And also, what are the resources needed to do this? So maybe we need canteen, maybe we need a place for doing a workshop, maybe we need trucks to bring food from A to B, etc. So this type of these boxes of the food policy action canvas make you reason on what type of actions, what type of resources, and therefore what type of stakeholders are needed to implement the food policy. And then finally, in the last stage, we try to fine-tune, so further develop the food policy idea, taking into account various drivers which a city may have. So maybe there's a lot of support from the municipality, maybe it's aligned with national guidelines on food policy, so this can drive a food policy. So we can see how can we shape the food policy in line with this type of driver. Also taking into account the barriers. So maybe there might be some barriers. So maybe budget is not available. Maybe there is not so much political support within the city or within the country for this type of initiative. So how can we change or fine-tune the food policy to take this into account? So basically, you will see the food policy action canvas in action in the presentation given by Nadia Tonali later on, where they apply the food policy action canvas to the city of Bergamo. But this is the main idea. The second tool, which is on the next slide, which we used in this project, is the theory of change. The theory of change is basically a tool which we suggest to use after the food policy action canvas. So the food policy action canvas shapes, let's say, the broader food policy. So it gives you is the basic, also the first step in a way of the theory of change, to identify what is the desired change, plus also what are the actions needed together, so what are the actions and the resources needed together. From then on, the theory of change takes this one step further in trying to see how can we implement this this food policy, and how can we make it even more, let's say, specific. So the first steps, and it's actually the third step here on this slide, so is map the assumptions and the preconditions. Assumptions being, okay, if we do this, then this results in that. So if we educate people on healthy food, the result will be that they will eat more healthy, for example. And preconditions, okay, these type of resources, these type of conditions, they need to be in place to reach this. So map these assumptions and preconditions we need to be in place to reach the desired change. Then we develop KPIs for each of the actions, and they can be KPIs on the long term, on the midterm, and on the short term, which we want to reach. So we say, okay, this is and this helps to shape the actions. Okay, so we say we need to do this first, then we need to do this, then we need to do this, and all these actions together, they lead to the desired change, which is in the end the food policy, which we developed in the Food Policy Action Canvas. During the implementation, we map in the implementation of the actions, we monitor the actions using these KPIs which we set. So we say, okay, we want to reach this in the midterm, we want to reach this in the short term, in the long term, and we evaluate and learn and see, is there something which we need to change? Now, I know again that this is quite abstract. So also after the presentation of Nadia, Mette Svengaard from Copenhagen will show how they used the theory of change in their city. So I think I will stop here. So then I'll introduce maybe very quickly the next speaker, which is Nadia Tonali, which will talk more about the Food Policy Action Canvas and how this is applied in Bergamo. And later on, as I said, Mette will take over and will tell us more about the theory of change as used by Copenhagen. Nadia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ernest. Good afternoon. My name is Nadia. I work in a European project office in the municipality of Bergamo, and also I'm a member of food policy team. In my presentation, I explain in practical how his food policy action canvas was useful for our food policy. Next slide, please. No, we started more or less 3 years ago, and we organized living labs. In this living labs, we find the needs, we identified the needs, and the main of 2 needs are increase the percentage of local and organic products and plant-based meals in school canteen, and the second, raise awareness about plant-based diets and promoting knowledge on the connection between food supply and nature and nutrition. Next slide, please. We also define our value proposition. We want to promote sustainable food consumption and facilitate the transition to healthy diets for increasing the consumption of vegetable protein while decreasing the animal protein, which is, we think we create this slogan, which is good for health and environment. Thank you. Next slide. Please, next slide. We want to realize 2 main activities. The first, we want to change the school canteen menus. We want to introduce in our school canteen 1 fully vegan menu per week. But we started from the increasing our percentage of organic and local food in the school canteens procurement. The second step was restyling of school menus with less meat and more plant-based food, legumes, and etc. And we organize technical training of kitchen staff on the preparation of plant-based dishes. And the last activities is monitor of satisfaction and food waste level with active participation of students. Next slide, please. There are some pictures of our school canteens training for school canteens staff, and the 2 flyers about our vegan menu into last week, because we create for our communication campaign. And next slide, please. Thank you. And also we support this change with a strong food education program. We start from our students, our primary school. We organize a study visit to our botanical garden and the farmer, to show cooking classes, workshop, and informative session on the origin of food, the meaning of ecological footprints, and the importance of biodiversity, local and seasonal food consumption. This is some picture of these activities. Thank you. Next slide, please. Families. We also involve families. We organize at the Botanical Garden in the Biodiversity Valley and in our school canteens informative session, show cooking, and open days aim at raising awareness on the importance of a local and seasonal diet and dispelling the myths about plant nutrition. Next slide, please. And also we organize the training for teachers and school canteen committees. We organize especially show cooking for green menu recipes and informative session to help them better understand the scientific basis for a healthy and sustainable diet and the link between individual choices and global issues. This is the course we have organized. Sorry, you can... Okay, we organize this course in our cooking center with the teachers. They cooked the green menu recipes, and it is very interested in these activities. Thank you. Next slide. We identify our beneficiary. Primary beneficiary are students from 3rd and 14th. Secondary beneficiary are parents, teachers, cooks and canteen staff, and in general citizens. Also, we identify before these activities and our key stakeholder. In this action, it is important to involve the city council member, the food policy team, and the municipality department, especially educational department, environment, botanical garden, and public procurement department. Also, we involve our local health agency to change the menu, school canteens company, and the other school sets and the teachers. It is important also for us involve external education experts like nutritionists, psychologists, etc. And please, next slide. Okay, stakeholder. We identify also the drivers. The main driver for us, it is a political commitment, citizen interest in issues related to food sustainability and local and organic food, a support from municipality department and the international network like Milan Urban Food Policy Pact, Eurocities, and we have also active food actors like Farmer Association. And barriers, we have also barriers. We have a complexity due to high number of food activities. Also, we have myths about plant-based diets. It is difficult to change menu because many parents think, but no, this menu don't get enough protein, are nutritional deficient. And also some recipe, it is difficult for the palatability for the students. And the last one is measure of impact of school canteens food supply, because we find only expensive and complex tools to measure this impact. Next slide, please. The last one of my slide presentation is key resources. We also identify our key resources. Physical resources like space for laboratories, our cooking center, botanical garden. Human resources, it's important to involve the employees of the municipality and school canteens company staff. Financial resources is fundamental because thanks to FoodTrails project, we realize these actions. And the last one is intellectual resources. It's important to identify external expertise in different topics. For us, it's important to identify nutrition, psychologists, health expert, educational expert, etc. And the next step for our food policy action canvas is we enlarge our green menu to all bar and restaurant gastronomy in our city. We also organize a competition for greenest restaurant in Bergamo, and the next week we will present to all bar and restaurant this initiative. We want every bar and restaurant in Bergamo guaranteeing at least one totally vegetable dish for each courses. I'm finished. Thank you for
Thank you very much, Nadia. It was a very clear, very interesting presentation of everything that you're doing in Bergamo. Thanks a lot for that. I just want to remind everyone that you can ask questions on Zoom through the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we will get to those after Mette's presentation of what is going on in Copenhagen and how you are applying the second tool presented by Ernst, which is the theory of change. So Mette, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Mette Svendgaard, and I work as project manager in the city of Copenhagen, where I work in the department where we have the responsibility for procuring food for all our citizens. And here we have a lot of activities focusing on procurement, of course, that's our focus, but we also work with a lot of others. What we base our work on a lot is our strategy. We already have a food strategy, and one of the targets is to have a 90% organic food, and then we also work for reducing our CO2 carbon footprint by 25% before 25. So that is our two main measures that we register. So this about using a theory of change within our department was not something we had done before. Taking part in FoodTrails supported us in being more structured in the way we work with our project activities to actually register the impact we are doing through our project activities. So we have managed to build up a system that describe how we make this change. And it ensures to see if there really is an impact on activities or if we should change the activities that we are doing. Yeah. But why are we actually doing all these activities? I think we can continue to the next slide, please. That's because within our team, we would like to make these systemic change of the food system through public food procurement. We would like to show all of the other cities and all of you that public food procurement is an important tool, not only you, but also internally in the municipality of Copenhagen. We would like to show the impact we actually are able to do through public food procurement. Theory of change was a tool that could support us in telling this story about how we make this change. Yeah, next slide, please. We have built up this model where you on top can see the green line that says activities within the FoodTrails period, and then the yellow beyond the FoodTrails project time. Beneath you see some numbers, and we have number one. We have what we start with. What is actually the challenges we are working with? What problems is it that we would like to solve, and who should benefit from that? So we started with discussing these activities, and this having the requests for a theory of change where working supported us in being more structured, and actually that helped us defining number two in the right side of the figure here. What impact is it that we would like to do with these activities? And then we work from the behind, and then we have what are the long-term outcomes, midterm outcomes, and what are some more specific results from our activities that we expect to have. But to reach these outputs, we will need to plan some activities to go in that direction. Yeah, next slide, please. So this is, you're not meant to be able to read this. It's just to show you how we have worked with a lot of post-its to discuss how can we support this impact we would like to make systemic change of the food system, public food procurement. We have a lot of different opportunities to work on this, but we have decided on 4 key focus areas, which then have different activities, outcomes, and outputs. Some outputs on the short term and others on the long term. So, but this not makes us able to measure the KPIs, as Ernst mentioned. We here, I write them as indicators. What type of indicators do we work with? We have actually both process indicators and impact indicators. So you have the process indicators, which are indicators that you try to measure during the process of developing while you have the activities. Is it a good process? Do we have the expected outcome of our activities? Yeah. To support this, that we would like to make this systemic change of the food system. So we had a process where we actually used them. There's a lot of suggestions in the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact. There's suggestions on indicators you can use to measure. We was inspired by this, and then we were not able to use them exactly, but we rewrote into our own. So if you go to next slide, please, you will see that on these white post-its, we have added some other post-its with the different indicators, but that we measure. Some of them, actually we have worked a lot with involvement of other departments in shaping these tools that we have developed. So we have forced ourselves, or kind of like promised to FoodTrails project and to our management, that we will involve different departments. Another example is that there's also a willingness to use this about those departments and other administrations willing to use what we actually developing that we have evaluated. And next. And also another one of our activities is something about education of kids, where they should learn what is a farmer and how do they produce potatoes. Do they get more awareness? And then also how many in this thinking of farm to school twinning, how many SMEs or farmers have we involved as food educators? So before this project, we have kind of like 0, maybe we had 1, but now we have another. And then we will like, beyond the FoodTrails project, we would like to keep on counting how many SMEs or farmers have we involved, and to support this systemic change of the food system through public food procurement. Yes, and I think that's it for me.
Thank you very much, Mette, for this presentation, and to all of the speakers for introducing these tools. And it was really interesting also to hear from you, Mette, how you adapted, the theory of change model to your specific context, and adapted also the indicators from the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact. So I think this really shows that indeed these tools are developed for the FoodTrails project, but they are really meant to then be made your own by the different cities. So now I would like to invite the audience to send in some questions. We've only received one for the moment that I'll get to in a minute. But maybe in the meantime, I have some questions for you, because it was very interesting to hear your different experiences. So maybe one question to Nadia and to Mette. You both kind of mentioned that, and also Ernst mentioned that these tools were very useful at the beginning of the process. And I'm curious to hear if you had to go back, this project started 4 years ago. Did you have to go back to these tools at some point and really think of actually some of what we were thinking at the beginning needs to be changed? Did you have to go back and adapt the tool maybe to changing circumstances or new challenges that you hadn't foreseen? Yeah,
I could
Mette?
maybe give in a comment on that. I think we were very ambitious when we started out with all of our KPIs or indicators that we would like to measure on, and with the resources we have within our team, we have maybe had been a little challenged on collecting all the data, but still it has supported us in at least collecting some data on during this process compared to when we started working with other activities. We did not collect as many data as we have done now. So we have been back looking at it, and it has supported us, this tool, also in other processes, we'll say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Nadia?
We use today also with the new initiative, the Food Policy Action Canvas. And when we started, we have done many mistakes. For example, we organize the Living Labs with many stakeholders. For example, we write a long list, but my advice, for example, or my things I learn for these tools, it is have clear the first step, stakeholder. Also, it's not too large, big, huge amount of stakeholder, of needs or action. It is better to start from a piece of this world of activities or the complexity of our territory. Because when we started, we lost many time to identify key stakeholder and so on, so on.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Indeed, that's something that also I have seen in the different city visits that we've seen, that often city officers want to, because the food system is so broad and you want to go ahead and start solving so many different aspects. But in fact, it was very helpful for them to be able to really go and zoom into one specific issue or action, and to really try to keep it a manageable amount, let's say a manageable ambition. Thanks a lot for those answers. Another question I had is, Nadia, you already gave some, but do you have other advice for city officers who are really at the early stages of developing a food policy? It can be specifically about these tools, or in general, looking back at the experience of your cities over the different years. Because I think that in our audience, we have some city officers who are maybe only at the very early stages of thinking through their food policy. So I think, this webinar series is really for them. And I think your experience here will be super valuable. Mette?
Yes, I think it's important just to start. Try to write down what is the impact you would like to do, and then accept that it's kind of like an iterative process where you go in a circle, you go back, and then you learn something by writing down some of activities and expected outcomes, or who are your beneficiaries. And then you maybe learn something in the process, and then you go back and rewrite the impact you would like to do. Maybe you can make it more clear, or you learn some new assumptions you will have to do to succeed or share to make other people better understanding the way you go. But try just to start out with something, even though it's not perfect. I think, start to work in a structured way. Support us also in having the acceptance from other departments within the municipality.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
And
Ernst?
quickly build on this. I think also the tool, like for the tools, what Matt is saying, it's quite iterative. So you learn as you do, so get started. So if you make, for example, you take the food policy action canvas and you develop a food policy in the beginning of the project, it's good because it's good as guidance, and it's good to communicate the idea which you have, but don't say, okay, now we're going to only do this. Okay, so as you learn, you can update the canvas, use the theory of change also to check your assumptions and to learn from this. So update it, change it as you go. So don't take it as a static tool or a document, but change it as you go.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So we have a question, a very interesting question in the chat. To what extent did you formulate maybe and fill the theory of change with beneficiaries? Maybe this is a question for any of you. Were they beneficiaries actively involved, or is it more of an internal document? Who wants to go for this one?
Yeah, I can.
Mette.
I would say in the ideal situation, you will involve your beneficiaries. And I think it's valuable if you prioritize time. We did involve some, but I think, and we also tried to involve some during the process. But if you want to succeed and empower other people to take over on the activities that you would like to implement or change in the future, I think this involvement is important, but it can be maybe a hard time to prioritize both your own time, but also to have other people engaged. If it's people in the kitchen, they are very busy, and who will have the time to prioritize this, and then maybe just accept it's not that many as you would like to, but at least you involve a few. As long as you not only, we have very different sizes of kitchens. We have kitchens producing food for 50, and we have kitchens producing food for 500 people, or we have, so still remember to have them all represented in one way or the other.
Yeah. And also the person who's asking the question is writing, as I can imagine that not all of the beneficiaries, for example, facility services for a larger employer or vulnerable groups of people in the neighborhood that are maybe the beneficiaries of informal food banks, they don't all have the same level of understanding of these complex food system topics. And I think that's a really important point of how do you engage different beneficiaries, different citizens in a way that is, accessible to them. Maybe, I don't know if Nadia or Ernst, you have a comment on this?
Yes, in our theory of change, we involve the teachers. The teachers are beneficiary of our food policy action, but they support us to change our survey to collect the data from the students. For us, the teacher is a very good beneficiary, and help us to change our tools to collect this data.
But I would say we also have involved some departments that we would not have involved if it wasn't for this process. Some other, we are buying category, we buy food, but we have 20 other categories, buying categories in the municipality. So we involved some of the other categories to have them challenge our theory of change and the process. So even though they are not a direct beneficiary from this right now, they may be, because we will maybe be able to transfer it to another category. So yeah.
Ernst?
Yeah, no, just to add just a small thing, like I have two small things. The tools itself you can use without citizens, but it's better to use them with citizens. They are designed to be used in living labs, so we change the tools which are already existing, such as the city region food system assessment, which is quite difficult to involve citizens because it's so complex. So we try to use easy tools, and it's better to use them in living labs. Some small point I would like to make is that in some of our cities, you need to be a bit careful also about who you want to involve, because some citizens, they have a louder voice than others, and there's a risk that you don't hear the ones who actually are in need of food policies, and you listen too much to maybe one who is represented very well. So be aware of this when involving citizens.
Okay, thank you very much. We have another interesting question here. In defining the value proposition in the first step, how did Bergamo and Copenhagen come up with the ideas of working on the school menu or public food procurement as part of this identification process? It would be interesting to know the differences between these two cities. Maybe I can imagine that it also starts with a kind of diagnosis of what the current food system looks like, where are the strengths, where are the weaknesses, and maybe identifying the pressing needs. Don't know if one of you wants to comment on this.
I can give a comment.
Yeah.
I would say, I think maybe what is special for us is that we had, since 2019, we had a food strategy already. So we had kind of like something to work within, and we have other departments working with the elderly, and some others work with the food for social vulnerable. And in the strategy, we have already defined what kind of food would we like to be served to the different groups, and we had developed food recipes already, and we had many food activities already. So this about working with public food procurement, that's maybe also something that comes to us because that's our area of responsibility, but also because we have developed a lot of other food-related and nutrition-related activities already, and we have an educational program for our kitchens. So we have many activities already, so that's why we could dive into this detailed area where we work with one of our living labs and pilots is to develop an app where we can have a better and more easy access to dialogue with our kitchens, because we have 1,000 kitchens, and we would like to also have contact and knowledge about what is the small kitchen bias, because we know a lot about the big kitchens, but how to have a better and more easy access to dialogue with the smaller kitchens. So yeah, that's some arguments for us diving into this, you can say kind of like a niche. Yeah.
And for Bergamo, we started from our food system analysis. In this analysis, we know better our food activities in our territory, our food activities, food actors, and we know that our school canteens is a good field how to start. With this food system analysis, we know better our territory, and we know better our school canteens, and we decided to start from this field, this topic, because there was a humus to grow something of new.
Yeah, so I guess in these cases, we saw two cities which already had some background, let's say, in making food policy. So they already had an idea of where to go. Some other cases also outside of the FoodTrails project where we have applied these tools. Not all the time cities had already food policies. Sometimes they didn't have an idea. So that this moment, in that case, I think it's good to use the Living Lab strategy still, so talk to people, involved citizens, and find out, okay, what are actually food policy needs in your cities? And there's a lot of different ways to do this. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. And we also have the question in the chat if there's somewhere where we can find the food policy action canvas. I don't believe that at the moment we have a public version of the document, but it pretty much is summarized with Ernst's slides that he was showing earlier. And also, I just want to flag to everyone here that as part of the FoodTrails project, we have the universities involved in the project that are also working on a handbook that will be really destined for cities looking to implement food policy in their city, with very tangible outcomes and learnings from this from the FoodTrails project, including the current program that we're running through at the moment, which is on cascading the learning, let's say. So we have we are pairing up new cities that have not been involved in the FoodTrails project until now, that have been going and visiting the FoodTrails project cities and learning a lot about what they have learned over the years. And also now this webinar series is part of this cascading program. So all of these concrete learning outcomes will be summarized as well in the handbook, and I do believe that there will be some aspects and chapters in that handbook that include these tools as well.
Yeah, I just checked actually on the website of the FoodTrails project. There are deliverables, and there is deliverables where you can see the canvas in it, so you can look it up. It's called, there's a deliverable called the CRFS report related to Food 2030. For example, there it is. There's then a couple more deliverables, so there you can find. It's a bit hidden, but it's there.
Okay.
Otherwise, I think they can mail me.
Yeah.
If you want to have more information, feel free to mail me. I can type my email address in the chat.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you, Ernst. And maybe for those, because someone is asking if it's possible to share the slides, maybe if you want to receive the slides as well, maybe you can also email Ernst, and you can get their slides. Are there any other questions in the chat? I don't see any. There's one question that I'm not totally understanding in the Q&A. So maybe if the person who wrote that question wants to rephrase a little bit to make it a bit more clear, it would be helpful. But otherwise, since we still have a little bit of time left, I wanted to ask Nadia and Mette, what, in your opinion, has been some of the real highlights of the FoodTrails project? I know it's a very broad question, but if you can pinpoint one or two real highlights, what has the project really enabled Copenhagen and Bergamo to do?
I think from the Copenhagen side, it has been very inspiring to take part in the FoodTrails project, because even though we have worked with food policy and this journey has been since 2009, actually, then we learn a lot from the different perspectives on how to work with food policies and how to implement new activities. And this about having the discussions, it has been supportive for us in our procurement processes. Yeah. And then last but not least, this about being forced into working more across our own administrations as a pretty big city. I think that has been very valuable for us.
Yeah, thanks. Nadia?
With the FoodTrails project, Bergamo strengthened our food policy. And for example, the last year, we approved our food policy guidelines, because the citizen and government know how it is important to implement these activities or this food policy, these policies. And also we learn many things when we met other cities, and the support of the expert, the university, it is important for us.
Ernst, I don't know if you want to add anything from your perspective.
My perspective is very different because I'm not representing a city. So my highlights, I don't know, I'll be happy if they use the tools and they say it's useful.
Great. We have another
one extra comment, because we have actually also succeeded to having much more contact to our politicians. Before the FoodTrails project, we were not that much engaged in the work together with our politicians, but now we have managed to have the mayor of children and youth area and has much more focus on the food and the importance of the school meal. Yeah, and I think we have been encouraged to do this through all these activities and inspiration from other cities in the project.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point to highlight. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, so we actually, together with him, having a a big event in June about school meals in the city of Copenhagen, and about with focus on procurement. Yeah.
Great. And I see we have one last question in the chat. Can you suggest any guides or requirements to establishing a living lab? So I'm going to post here in the chat another outcome of the FoodTrails project that you can find here about living labs. And again, in the handbook that will be made published towards the end of the project, I believe it will be made public in the last quarter of the year. You will also find some very interesting resources in there. Any last thoughts or comments from our panelists? No. Okay, so I would like to thank you very much to all the panelists for your very interesting presentations. It was really, I think, very useful. I hope it was very useful also for our participants. And for that, I remind you that we would really like to understand from the audience if this was a very, if this was a useful webinar for you. Did it address some of the questions that you had coming in? Because we still have 5 episodes left of the series that will run until the end of June. And of course, we're still tailoring the webinar. So if there are specific questions that you think would be very important to address, it would be really great if you could share that with us through this survey. So let me find again, here it is. I will post here again in the chat the survey. So we really invite you to please take a look, and you will find you will also find, let me find it again, the calendar of the next episodes. Sorry, here we go. So don't forget to sign up to the next episodes as well. Here it is in the chat. You can also follow the FoodTrails project on LinkedIn and on Twitter. We're quite active there. We are sharing not only the next events that are taking place, the next webinars, but there will also be a series of podcasts that is coming out soon. Because we're in the last year of the project, there are many different documents and resources that we'll be sharing and making public, really sharing all of the outcomes of the project. So if you're curious about those and you want to learn more, really follow us on social media, and you will find, you will hear about everything that we're publishing. So I'd like to thank everybody for for being here. Thanks a lot to Mette, Ernst, and Nadia for taking the time to speak to everybody about your experiences. And yeah, would like to close it here. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a nice afternoon and bon appétit.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.